Hello and welcome to The Table. I'm Tyler Mitchell, Discipleship Pastor at Fellowship West, and we're so glad you pulled up a chair today. Here at The Table, we believe that faith grows best in community, that some of the most meaningful conversations happen not just in pews or pulpits, but around tables. Each episode will share stories, reflections, and honest conversations about life, faith, and what it means to follow Jesus together. Whether you're part of our West family, just exploring faith, or somewhere in between, you have a seat here. Today, we're excited to continue our series of interviews with people from our West family. Over the next few weeks, you'll hear stories, insights, and reflections from our church leaders and members of our church community as we talk about what God is doing in and through their lives. So grab a cup of coffee, settle in, and let's have a conversation. Today, we are continuing our interview series with voices from our Fellowship West family. And we're especially excited about this one because we're sitting down with our children's pastor, Ryan Linduff. If you've ever dropped off your kids on a Sunday morning or Wednesday night, or you watch them grow in their love for Jesus, you've already seen the impact of his ministry. In this episode, we'll hear his story, what led him into children's ministry, and the heart behind how we disciple the next generation at Fellowship West. Let's start us off by sharing a little bit about your life growing up, your family, your hometown faith, what faith was like for you growing up, and kind of, tell us about your early years.
I grew up the first few years of my life in Texas. And my parents were involved in church. They were college leaders. So I grew up hanging out with all the college kids as a up to 6-year-old. Really had the head knowledge then to follow Jesus, become a Christian. So I got baptized then. And then I moved to Atlanta, where I spent the majority of growing up from 6 years old to my early 20s. And that's where, I really shaped a lot of personality, a lot of likes, dislikes, kind of those years being in Atlanta. We were in a spot in outside of Atlanta that was pretty melting pot. So I was able to be around other cultures, be around other situations, things like that. So that really shaped some of my journey. But also during that time, my life really became a checklist. And so what I thought I was doing right, I was really doing right because I thought that's what I was supposed to do, not because I had an actual heart change.
Right.
And you could looking back, I could tell because it was very much one person at school or with my buddies and another person at church.
Yeah. Just putting on the different hats, the different masks.
Yeah, that thing. So having those formative years being in the South, It was real easy to do that because it wasn't a big deal to be a Christian by name.
Yeah, it was a cultural thing.
Yeah, it was completely cultural. And you actually see that a lot of deconstruction people, at least I've noticed. I'm sure they're really from all over, but I do notice a lot of them grew up in that Bible Belt, southeastern part of the United States, where I don't want to say like my church and my home life wasn't legalistic, but that kind of style where this is blatantly wrong and there's no nuance to it.
Right.
And there wasn't really a questioning of why things are wrong or why you believed what you believed. It was just, this is what you did. And because the culture was like that, no one around you was questioning what you believe. You never had to think through, well, if this person asks me something, where do I go? How do I defend myself?
Right.
So that was kind of spiritually, I guess, is how I shaped my life there.
So did you always see yourself in ministry or did you have other plans at first?
Yeah. So in high school, I was a sports editor of the school newspaper my last 2 years, and we won awards and stuff like that. So I really had grandeur ideas of becoming a sports writer. You'll probably hear throughout my story a bunch, but I think it's important for us as Christians to, especially as men leading families, it's important to look back at moments in our lives that were clearly God moments.
Absolutely.
So when we are making big decisions or when we're questioning ourselves, we can look back and go, dude, that was God. There was nothing else. And so I have a lot of those moments in my life, but one of the first ones I remember as far as this journey to ministry goes is my first year. I went to community college. I took my general English class, and I would have been starting college. My freshman year would have been August of 2002. So we had an assignment that was talking about the impact of 9/11 through the Iraq War. It was some sort of assignment like that. And for me, because of my slight obsession with sports, that was what was in my head. And, me viewing college at the time as something of, this is supposed to prepare me for what I want to do in life. Mm-hmm. Therefore, what I wrote about, or my topic, was basically how sports helped heal America in certain senses, things like that. So, and I remember it vividly because I actually got told that wasn't really on topic. I disagreed. And anyways, all that to say, that was kind of turning point to just having a bad experience with writing. And it really, I don't know if it took the joy of writing away, but it really discouraged me to write. And so at some point, I ended up moving to Athens, Georgia, which is where the University of Georgia is. Got into a lot of partying, stuff like that. Got to a point in my life where all the things the world were telling you should be fulfilling just weren't providing everything. And eventually I thought back to the last time I really found joy. And I just remember it being in youth ministry. I didn't remember, let's say, like, oh, that was when I was really on fire for God and stuff like that. I just remember, like, no, if I look back, like, my happiest times were doing student ministry, like being in student ministry. So that led me to go back to get back to God. And what I thought was a recommitment to God, but really what it was finding salvation for the first time in my life, like that actual salvation. And so with that being said, I'm the current youth pastor at the church I grew up in. Was not my youth pastor, but was one of the college guys that hung out with me a lot when I was in high school, and I just knew him really well. So he was the first person I went to. He kind of took me under his wing. I started helping in student ministry, and I liked it. And we went on a ski trip, and I could not tell you one spiritual thing about this trip, but I remember just this off the wall comment he made about, because I think it was his first like official trip with the student ministry. I remember he just kind of said something off, and it was something to the effect of, he kept saying, man, I get paid to do this weekend. And he kept saying that. And I was like, and I don't think that was his message that weekend to high school students, but I was like, it latched onto me, and I was just like, oh, maybe I should look at what I like to do. And I couldn't figure out what I like to do, except for I really like doing student ministry. So obviously with discipleship and some counseling with him and the senior pastor who we're good friends with, I felt the call to ministry. And so that's kind of where ministry started is that long. I mean, it was a journey, but yeah, it was clearly, that part of life was clearly steps that only God could do. And one thing I always talk about in my testimony is when I was in college and everything, like there's a lot of situations I put myself in that could have ended a lot worse. In fact, if you turn on the news, it usually does end a lot worse. Now, God protected me even when I was someone who should have known better and didn't. In fact, looking back at that time, I think the verse when Jesus tells the people, there are some who say, Lord, Lord, but don't know me. Like that's the life I was living. Like I knew everything about Jesus. I knew the religion, stuff like that, but I didn't know who he was on that relationship level. And so definitely God protected me during that, and then just put the right people in my life there. And so that's kind of how I got called to ministry. And even the call to ministry was just little things as I think back. I was at a church that was very supportive of that. So that was cool. We had a guy that is probably for the previous generation and my generation listening, but if you know Henry Blackaby, he was like one of the main people in contact with Henry Blackaby at the time. And my family actually had a connection to the Blackabys. And so like, I just got a bunch of like material from the Blackaby library, basically. And so there's just a lot that right when I was like committed, because as everyone knows, when you first get excited about something, like you're like all in.
Sure.
And so like when I was all in that moment and in a time where I had more free time, I was getting all these resources and able to meet people. So that was a big part of kind of keeping me on track and helped me realize this was a true calling there.
So what was the series of events that led you to Kansas City? Because obviously you're not in Atlanta now.
So I started looking at seminary. If you live in Atlanta, your big seminary choice at the time especially was New Orleans Baptist Theological Seminary. One, because it was the closest SBC. I did grow up Southern Baptist, and so it was the biggest Southern Baptist seminary in my area. But then secondly, if you're familiar with Louis Giglio, I think it was Giglio's church, but one of the big churches in our area had like a satellite campus, and
cool.
Which is pretty crazy to think, because now you look at it, but I mean, online school wasn't a thing yet. Satellite campuses were barely a thing. And it was literally going to school and watching videos at the church. Like that was going to be my seminar, but I knew it was a good school. And so that's where I was leaning towards that. And it made sense. And it's where the youth pastor mentor I had went. I had everything made sense and was falling into place. Mm-hmm. And then my dad, he kind of did rec ministry. He had done that part-time, I believe, at the time. And so there was an opportunity in Florida for him. It got so far in the process that literally my parents, we had to have the conversation of like, here are the options you can, because at the time I was still kind of trying to figure out what I was doing, trying to start school. So money wasn't exactly flowing great. And my parents basically said like, hey, if we take this job in Florida, which is probably likely, we're going to have to get an apartment, at least for the first few years. So either you can move down with us and get your own apartment, or stay in Atlanta, get your own apartment. And so that was kind of the options. And I was like, oof, I hadn't paid rent in a while. So that wasn't super exciting. So through that, I have an aunt and uncle that had moved here, Randy and Penny Linduff. And then my other aunt, who is single but had always had a great job, she had just moved to Kansas City, and she had like a fully finished, basically basement apartment minus a kitchen. And she was like, well, if you want, you can just move here and not worry about rent. So as a early 20s, I had my lifelong friends at that point, but other than that, I wasn't dating anybody, anything like that. Like I didn't really have any strong connections. So I did start like thinking about it as an option. I was still leaning towards Atlanta, but at some point it changed, and I fully committed to Kansas City. I started looking up Midwestern and what that kind of looked like, what that would look like there. And so I ended up applying, getting into Midwestern, all that stuff. Went through the church, did, like I said, a very supportive home church. The pastor actually brought me down front, kind of told the briefer version of this story, and they gave me a Bible, a nice big study Bible for going to seminary. And then the student ministry, I'll never forget this, mainly because we did a big prayer night for me before I left. So like fully committed. Parents moved me out here. I move in, everything. Or no, let me back up. So before I moved in, but we were kind of going through all this like goodbye, blah, blah, blah. Like I was going to Kansas City. Right. My dad, who, like I said, they went down for the weekend to, I think it was Gainesville, Florida. And they went down to meet, like, it was kind of like the final meeting before you really start making plans. In fact, they were looking at apartments. So, I mean, they were
ready to go.
Yeah. I mean, in my head, I was like, oh, I get to go to Florida now when I come visit my parents. So like we were there. So then the pastor made a statement about one of their measuring tools was salvation through different events. So like before an event, he would say, this is how many people I expect to be saved.
Oh.
And that was a measurement. So I don't know how strict it was if you hit that number or not, but it made my dad super uncomfortable and kind of threw up a red flag. And so like all of a sudden that kind of fell through and my parents were staying in Atlanta, but I was pretty much already at that point, was pretty much too late to stay in Atlanta. So I actually ended up moving to Bonner Springs. And so, yeah, that's kind of so at that point I moved here. And so pretty much free rent and a God situation back home led me to Kansas City. So,
okay. So you moved to Kansas City, you start school at Midwestern. What was kind of the next step in your journey?
So at that point I needed a job. So I worked at Shawnee Golf and Country Club, which the free golf was great, but that was about it. But one thing's because I'd gone to the same church since I was 6 years old, I was so determined to church shop.
Yeah.
In fact, I'm not gonna lie, I was a little excited to church shop because I never got to do, because one, my parents decided where I went and I just stayed there.
Right.
And then when I was in Athens, like I said, I was not living the Christian life, so I didn't go to church. So I was like, I get to church shop, we can find it. I go, but my family all goes to Lenexa Baptist Church. I actually had some friends from Atlanta that were in my were in the student ministry with me that were going to Lenexa Baptist Church. So I was like, all right, well, week one, I'll just go to Lenexa Baptist Church. And week one turned into not looking at other churches again. I just felt good there. Pastor Steve Dighton was the senior pastor at the time. It was already a pretty big church at that time. It was a super exciting place to be. So I jumped in there, and I think December of the year I moved here. Obviously, one thing I didn't realize moving from Georgia to Kansas City and working at a golf course was golf courses kind of end up shutting down for like a couple months in the winter. Yeah. And so I was like, because in Georgia, we just played year round.
Sure.
And so I was like, I don't have a job. Like I was employed without a job, if that makes sense. And so,
place to be.
Yeah. So I was like, I need a job. And so a maintenance job opened up at Lenexa Baptist Church. So I started working their maintenance, started serving in high school ministry, specifically there with Brian Richardson. And one of my good buddies, who was the ministry assistant, Brad Ollenhausen, he was the ministry assistant at the time. We became really good friends. He kind of mentored me in this role of like really how to be a assistant really in ministry and what that looks like.
Yeah.
Both the pastoral side as an assistant and just like, if you've ever been in that role, whatever it is, but especially in ministry, you end up doing a lot of in a church like Lenexa, you're doing the designing, the printing, the kind of the setup, all that kind of stuff. That's kind of your job. And then your pastoral side is kind of just being there for kids. And so kind of helped me navigate that. And so eventually Brad left for another ministry opportunity, which opened up the door for me. And since again, I'd been doing it for free. I was a natural person to hire. So I moved into that role. And in that time, a couple things were happening. Lenexa had moved to more of an intern style program, fellows program. That was, young ministry guys from Midwestern coming in and filling some of these more assistant roles. And they had their own program. And I wasn't really in that. I was kind of on a weird island, not being treated that way, but just kind of, I wasn't really part of that program, but I was doing all the same ministry work as them. So it was a really weird situation because at the same time, a young up and coming pastor named Matthew Clow was looking to plant a church in this city called Shawnee, Kansas. Actually, as the high school ministry assistant, I'd ended up, one of our summer mission projects, like local, was helping Fellowship West remodel the Bonner campus and all this. So I actually was part of that as a Lenexa Baptist person. But I got called in the pastor's office one day. Matt was sitting there and Brian was in there and the pastor was in there, but I was very confused on what was going on. There was now an opening at West, and the idea and the goal for the last couple of years at this point was to get me to a full-time ministry position. And that wasn't going to be at Lenexa because of just the staffing situation there at that point. So everyone's goal was to try to get me in my own student ministry position at that point. And basically the meeting went that they were going to move me to become the campus ministry assistant, I believe was my official title at Fellowship West.
Mhm.
And when I came to West, really as the campus ministry assistant, but basically as the student minister or leader, whatever, it was me and Matt. And so that was a really cool experience, just being like going from a mega church staffing situation to literally 2 people on staff.
Right.
That was our situation, especially until Ben got hired, was if something needed to happen, if the toilet's clogged, if last minute setup needed anything like that, we were the ones, we were doing it. That was a really good time there. But obviously, like I said, the goal was always full-time ministry, even here. And
you were still part-time at this point.
Because I'm still part-time. And one of the other great benefits, if nothing else came out of Fellowship West, which obviously, if you're listening to this, you probably know more came out of Fellowship West. But if nothing else had come out of Fellowship West, and I truly mean this, a young married couple, a young wannabe minister started just showing up to Fellowship West during the week. My name was Tyler Mitchell. And
literally, I wasn't on staff. I would literally.
No, he just literally come and kind of fell under me to an extent. And at first it was definitely it was cool for me because while Matt was probably really mentoring him, I did get to kind of have him do some student ministry stuff with me, obviously worship. And that was a big part, but I'm talking to you in third person right now. It's really weird. But again, it was a God thing. One, through just the relationship we have, because as we move forward in my ministry journey, you definitely see our relationship as part of that. But 2, when it was time to leave, it helped everything make sense.
Yeah, sure.
Because I never felt like I was abandoning West.
Right.
It definitely felt like God was there because you were taking over at that point and all this stuff. So also during that time, I was doing a lot of interviews, a lot of that. I mean, that was a nice thing about kind of having that situation of knowing that my full-time future wasn't at West.
Yeah.
I say that with an asterisk, obviously, but also Matt knowing that too. So the goal was to get me out. So as I'd go on interviews and stuff, I'd come back, I'd meet with Matt. And one of the things Matt really encouraged me on, Matt was like, I know you're confident, but I don't think you're doing well in interviews because everything else, you should be getting the job.
Yeah.
When he said that, I was like, I don't think that's it. If anything, I'm killing in interviews. I'm awesome to talk to. And that was kind of my attitude. But he's like, I think you think that, but he goes, and he knew some of my anxiety struggles that I didn't know to label as anxiety.
Sure.
I just thought I was a scaredy cat, I guess, for lack of a better term. And I really hated myself for it. I didn't allow myself to hate myself, but I really did. And so he encouraged me to talk to somebody who encouraged me to go to the doctor, all this stuff. So I ended up getting diagnosed with anxiety, but got on the right treatment plan for that and started managing that. And I had 2 interviews after that, and I basically landed both those jobs. So I had a decision to make. We decided to move to Bentonville, Arkansas, and work at a church there. Similar situation. I was coming on as the children and student pastor, but I was basically a student pastor because we had a children's director. Basically, my children's director role was if something happened that needed pastoral guidance, I would be the pastor for that.
Right.
Other than that, I didn't really do anything with children's ministry. And so there was one day about a year after the job, and at this point we had 3 kids away from family.
Sure.
That my parents had moved to Arkansas at this point, but her whole family, Brooklyn's whole family and world were in Kansas City. And so I distinctly remember there's one day, and I don't remember any of the circumstances surrounding it, but what I do remember is I called you and I said, hey, I came into work today and I wrote my resignation letter. And I don't know if I'm resigning, but I just felt the need to write that.
Mm-hmm.
And we kind of talked through it. And then the pastor called me into his office. I went over to his office, and little did I know that I was getting fired that day. I still don't really know the reasons. I do know we were short on money, and the person who kind of took over from me was the person I had kind of trained up to, I guess, take my job. A little did I know, because he's doing it now currently, which is great. I'm glad it worked. Now I can say glad it worked out for everyone.
Yeah.
But at the time, and the pastor wasn't really mad. In fact, he was more mad that no deacon showed up it was just me and him in the office. So he had asked deacons to be there. No one wanted to come. So at that point, I was like, well, and I reached in my back pocket and I said, hey, will you let me resign? Because I didn't do anything. There was no moral failure to the firing.
Right.
So I simply said, hey, will you let me resign so that when I fill out because I still knew I wanted to be in ministry. It didn't change that. And so did that, called Brooklyn, told her the situation because it was a pretty financial struggling church. I only had 1 month severance and this had to have been April. Or I remember.
Yeah, it was shortly after Easter.
Yeah, shortly after Easter, and Silas still had a year left of kindergarten. And so we had decided pretty much that day to move back to Kansas City. And so for about a month, I traveled back and forth Kansas City, living in my in-laws, selling cars, and going to West, I believe. Because I had pretty quickly called, I think I called you immediately.
Yeah.
Told you what happened. And then Matt called me, which wasn't super unusual. He usually called me about once or twice a month. We just check in, talk through ministry, stuff like that. And he had called me and I said, hey, we're coming back to Kansas City. I'm coming back to West. And at the time, I was just going to be a member. I was like, I just know I'm going to church at Fellowship West. Because at that point, I don't think it was church hurt necessarily, but it was definitely I need to be with a pastor I trust.
Yeah.
So I then called you back and said, hey, we're coming to West. So whatever you need student ministry wise, I'm there. Dude, if I'm not working, we're going to reverse roles basically. I'm going to come in and work. Matt called me back and called me because at this point you were part-time still.
Right.
Maybe moving to full-time, but we weren't 100% sure if that was going to happen yet.
Yeah.
So Matt called me and said, hey, what I don't want is for you to randomly move back, start helping in student ministry, and people assume that Tyler's going to, because you were at a point in your life where you needed to go full time, kind of where I was.
I was about to graduate.
Yeah, you're about to graduate. At this point, you'd been married for several years.
Yeah.
So you need to move one way or the other too. And so
it really was kind of a reversing of our.
Yeah. And so it's really weird. So Matt ended up calling me and said, hey, I don't really want you in student ministry now just because of the optics of it. And that made total sense to me. He goes, but I'd love for you to help in children's ministry. Nick is our children's pastor, and I'd love for you to just go if you want to serve. That's where I want you to serve. Well, my time at Lenexa, Chris Williams was the children's pastor at the time. He's now the pastor at Fellowship Church in Greenwood. And I remember at some point randomly, he made the statement that if you're serving and your heart is for your church, you serve where the church needs you to serve, not where you want to serve. And that's why he was doing children's ministry at the time. And so I said, I don't really want to do children's ministry, but if that's where you need me, if that makes the most sense for church, I'll do it.
Right.
And so that was I didn't hate kids. Obviously I had them and I had fun with kids, but I just didn't want to pastor kids.
Right.
So I told Matt and then kind of told Tyler, hey, I'm coming back. I'm going to do children's ministry until your situation does whatever it does. And then when it's time for me to go back in student ministry,
jumping back.
The next Sunday, I'm back in student ministry.
Yeah.
And everyone was cool with that. And to fast forward a lot, I don't think I've done student ministry officially since that conversation.
That's true.
So end up doing children's ministry, end up kind of being Nick's Sunday morning guy because I would serve every week because I'd grown up being at church all morning, so didn't need to change then. So pretty much Sunday morning, I would teach or wherever Nick needed me, I would do it. And then Nick got the opportunity to plant a church. And so there's this children's pastor opening. I am a guy called to ministry, but at that point I was traveling for a third party company called Apex, which worked with Cerner. Exclusively with Cerner. I had a lot of good relationships inside Cerner. I had family members inside of Cerner. I had been probably trying for a year because being a contract worker meant sometimes I worked, sometimes I didn't.
Sure.
Being a traveling contract worker in 2020 meant I didn't work hardly at all.
Right.
But that had started to pick up. And so at that point, I was like, I want to move to Cerner. And we had made a family decision that Cerner would be how I make money, how I set up my family. It would just be, that's my career.
Right.
And then my ministry now is just going to be volunteering where Fellowship West needs me.
Right.
That was my commitment. Because at that point, I was like, I want to get back in ministry and go to another church. Like, I remember distinctly feeling very peaceful about it.
Yeah.
Until Sunday morning, and I'm like, listen, I cannot tell you about the sermon. I can't tell you anything about the Sunday morning except the phone call I made to you and said, because we're still really good friends. And I said, Tyler, I think God's calling me to be the children's pastor at Fellowship West. I don't know if Matt wants me to be the children's pastor at Fellowship West. So I said, I think pretty much the gist of the conversation was, but I still want to attend Fellowship West.
Right.
And as a person with pride, whether I should have it or not, right, it would be very hard to get literally rejected as a children's pastor and still feel like you could serve at that church.
Right.
So
in children's ministry.
Especially in children's ministry. Yeah. So I was trying to navigate these feelings and that process and the actual stress and anxiety of what does that look like if it doesn't happen?
Right.
And I think, so I called you and basically said like, hey, I have interest. If Matt wants to move forward, let me know or have him call me, whatever. If he doesn't, if the conversation is, I don't think that's the right fit or whatever the conversation is, don't ever talk to me again about that. Yeah. That way. Yeah. Sorry. Good point. Don't ever bring it up again. You don't have to tell me he said no. I will just assume it's no.
Right.
And then I can make up some stupid reason on why I wasn't the right fit. And I could continue to come to West, continue to serve.
Yeah.
Cause that was my actual desire.
Yeah.
Was to be at West. All right. So fast forward a little bit. We went to Branson for post Christmas holiday, get those last couple days of our season passes, see lights, just get out of town. And two things happened before I went to Branson. Number one, Matt came to me and said, hey, let's have lunch after when you get back.
Yeah.
And I said, great. Now, I've known Matt long enough to have a really good idea because this is probably within a month of our conversation with my conversation with you. And I was like, fairly certain I know what this lunch is about. Yeah. Maybe it's just about hanging out, whatever. Cause I mean, like Matt had been my pastor for a while now and all that. But I was pretty certain I knew. It was kind of out of the blue. So I was like, I was very confident I knew at least what it was about. The other thing that happened is I had a video interview with Cerner, which I had been trying to get into Cerner for like years.
Yeah. So
we go on. I have a video interview with Cerner, which is the first step I'd ever gotten. I thought it went really well. I thought it went great. I was pretty confident after that interview in getting that position. And so we get back home and I'm supposed to meet with Matt. And the morning before, I'm like getting ready to go to lunch with Matt. Cerner calls me and offers me a job. Now, the two things about the Cerner job, or really three things about it, was one, it pretty much meant traveling 5 to 7 days out of the week. And sometimes that traveling meant you didn't know you're traveling until like that morning. Because now I'm not contract, I'm employed.
Right.
As a contract person, I could say, I don't want to do that or whatever. But the other good thing about Cerner is if you don't know what Cerner is, it is a healthcare software company, which means they have very good healthcare.
Sure.
In fact, back when the campuses were all around and it was a lot before it got bought out, they had doctors literally at each campus. And if me or any of my kids or Brooklyn got sick, I would just go to the Cerner office and it was free healthcare basically.
Yeah.
But then it had really good insurance. And Brooklyn was working for a self-employed company. So she didn't have very good insurance. And so Matt met with me, offered me a children's pastor job. And I think at the time it was going to be part-time, no insurance.
Right.
But I remember saying, Matt, if either we had this lunch as a breakfast or the day before, or Cerner had called me this afternoon, I probably would have accepted the job.
Yeah.
I go, but I don't see how I can be a good leader of my family and turn down this insurance.
Right.
While still going part-time, And I knew pretty much that if I was going to do this, it was going to be the same thing earlier where I was part-time, but I was really working. Because of Brooklyn's job, I was able to do that. And so I kind of told him that. And Matt he's like, that makes sense. He goes, I get that. And like, I agree with that, basically. He's like, I want you to be the children's pastor, but also, like, you are not doing something wrong by turning it down. Right. Trying to come to me there. He goes, when do you have to let Sandra know? So I said, dude, I got a week. He goes, I'll call you back before 5. So at that point, I literally called Brooklyn. I'm like, look, here's what I did get the job, but I got both jobs. At this point, I'm like, I got several jobs. Everyone wants me, No, I said, here's the search situation. I go, here's the Fellowship West situation. And I remember telling Brooklyn, I was like, I think financially though, we'll be fine, but there's no insurance. And Brooklyn's kind of like, we really got to have that insurance. I was like, that's what I said. So that's right. I said, he's coming back at 5. I said, let me ask you this. I said, if insurance, even if they have to drop the hourly rate, like, let's take the money out of it. If insurance is offered, I was like, I don't know if he can pull that off, but if insurance is offered, are we good? And she's like, yes. And then if something else is done, then I'll call you and we'll talk about it. So Matt eventually calls me, talked to, I assume, personnel and finance. And he said, okay, we may have to delay full-time a little longer, or it may even have been less hourly. I honestly don't remember. But he said, but we have worked it out where we can cover the insurance on the same plan as we would if you were full-time. So Matt goes, so pray about it, talk to Brooke. And I said, no, we're good. I was like, I'm in. He's like, well, talk to Brooke. I go, nope, I already called her. And I said, as soon as we finished lunch, I asked her if they offer insurance, are we good? And she said yes. So at that point, I was able to say yes to that. Like I said earlier, you look at these moments where God is clearly moving. And that was a moment. I mean, I had waited years for Cerner to offer me a job. Right. And have something steady. And to the point where I feel like this is the most biblical lining up of God's character in my own personal life, to the point where I was like, all right, I'm committing to basically be a free servant for the church while working this full-time job, to be thrown right back into turmoil, but then to immediately go, like, to be like, oh, God literally set up my plan perfectly and then tore it down with his plan within hours. Right. And I had to make everything in the world would say, just take the Cerner job. Yeah. It made all the sense in the world. Like, I had some good vacations because I was traveling a lot. Sure. So like, I was turning down that too. But obviously through that, became the children's pastor part-time, but through the generosity of the church and just Matt and finance and personnel, whoever else involved, sticking to their plan of moving full time. Like, they were able to do that in a timely manner, which again, really just solidified, like, this is the place where God has me. Yeah. And God, I've obviously, from my story, you can tell God can always make changes, but right now God has me here, and I have no thoughts of like going back. I have no thoughts of, like, I love doing kids ministry. It's 100% a God thing, because when I moved from Arkansas, I couldn't imagine being the children's pastor. Right. But, through just challenging the kids, really, and like, I get to have these deep theological conversations. Yeah, that's awesome. Especially with our older kids, I challenge them with stuff that I tell my adults that hear me teach all the time. I'm like, hey, there's going to be stuff that I know not all of them get, but I'm hoping down the road they get it. Right. We're going to sprinkle those seeds in, and maybe down the road it clicks, or maybe someone else says it in a way that has nothing to do with me, but that kind of seed is there. So it grows, Sure. And so it's just been a crazy journey in ministry, and just, the interweaving of God is incredible. It helps when you're struggling to look back and go like, oh, this is, like, it's not hard for me to doubt that this is what God wants me to do. Even when the enemy tries to tell me it's not, or tries to belittle me, I go, no, there's too much God in my life there's too much influence of God through my journey to not believe this is where I'm supposed to be. So, yeah. That's great, man. Appreciate you sharing that. So you've been in full-time children's ministry for about 4 years now. So what are some of what are some of your favorite parts about being a children's pastor? For me, it's always going to be relationships. It's my favorite part of being a pastor. I get to build so many relationships. It's one of my favorite things is this time of year when the fifth graders start getting ready to move up, and when they're kind of ready to go to student ministry.
Yeah,
it hurts your personal heart. Like
Sure.
personally, you're like, man, don't get too excited yet. Like but it really makes me know that I've done it right. And we structure, because of my background, we pretty much run children's ministry like I would a student ministry, but on lower level. So
right.
if you're not familiar with our children's ministry, we do a lot of times I'm looking at what songs we're doing on Sunday morning to do downstairs. We go into deep Bible stories, and when I teach them, like, I'm not watering it down so they can understand every single thing. Right? Like, I want them to understand the big point. I want them to understand where they're at. But like, we're going to challenge our children to know deeper things. But when I challenge these kids, like, they're getting it.
Yeah.
So this time of year is one of my favorite time of year just because it shows that readiness. But other than that, I don't really have a favorite time. I just enjoy doing what I do. I get to come and hang out with kids like 90% of the time and teach them about Jesus and just have a blast with them. Obviously, VBS is a blast. We have a lot of fun. It's a lot of work. We have a lot of fun. Being a former student pastor, and with Lenexa, we actually ran our own camps, and I had to be a part of that. So anytime I'm doing summer camp, whether it's kids or student ministry, I'm loving every minute of that. But really just want to get to be around the kids and get to know the parents. It's exciting when the kids are. The best thing about being a children's pastor, I think, is that because we want to make sure their faith journey is their own and make sure when they do follow Jesus, it's not because of their parents. It's not because, like, for me, like, it's just what you're supposed to do as a church kid, whatever. Right. We want to make sure it's a genuine relationship. And obviously, we're not expecting them, like, the sanctification process begins at that moment. Sure. So, like, there's not an expectation of that. But because that's our goal, is to make sure they're in the right place. And what I'll tell the kids all the time in the meetings is I'll say, hey, this isn't to say you're right or wrong, but it's to help us know how we need to disciple you.
Right.
Because I'm going to disciple a lost kid a lot different than I'm going to disciple a saved kid.
Yeah.
But every single baptism, I get to have that meeting. Right. And I just get to have a one-on-one faith talk with these kids. And it's incredible what they come up with on their own.
Yeah.
From just knowing the answers, but having that, like, as an 8-year-old, to have a moment where for sure salvation is cool and a little insane to me.
Yeah.
Because, like, a lot of times, the big thing we ask, like, adults is, so what your testimony is, who you were before Christ, who you were after Christ. Like, that's a famous one. Well, if you're a church kid at 8 years old, your life most likely isn't going to look that different than before and after. So sometimes I get something simple like, oh, well, I know I should treat my siblings and my parents better. Hey, that's sanctification.
Sure.
Most 8-year-olds don't do that very well. Yeah. So that's sanctification 100%. That's a great answer. But then also on that same scale, I've gotten, like, I think one of the last meetings I had, it was like, I don't really know. And I was like, okay, that's fine too, because it's hard to, an 8-year-old, 9-year-old, 10-year-old put those in words. And he's like, I don't know how to explain it. I just know, like, there was something empty in me. And then once I made that salvation, like, I didn't feel that anymore. And I was like, bro, that's the gospel.
Yeah.
Boom, done. Yeah. And I'm like, that's awesome. So you get to hear 10-year-olds speak like most adults don't even know how to tell their story that way. I think the Bible says something about coming like a faith, like a child. So I think we get to see that childlike faith. I get to see it every Sunday, every Wednesday. It's a great joy. Working with, having people excited, the adults that are helping. Sunday morning kids, man, Wednesday night kids, man, is not the easiest thing. We're not starting at 6:30 saying, like, all right, guys, it's time to start. And then everyone's quiet, listening, engaged for an hour. That's not how it goes. It is a constant of, like, all right, guys, focus in.
Right.
All right. I know you're having fun. And there is a balance of, like, I always say this, no offense to school. School has its place, but I don't want church to be school.
Sure.
I want church to be fun, and they know about you. I'm going to invite their friends. No one invites their friends to come to school with them the next day.
That's a good point.
Number one, I don't think it's allowed. But number two, it's school.
Yeah.
Even if you love school, it's still school.
Right.
We want people to invite their friends to church. We want them to be like, we want them when they're telling stories about Fellowship West, other kids are listening going like,
I want to be there.
I want to be there.
Yeah.
My goal as a children's pastor at Fellowship West is to make this the place, because I know 100% they're getting the gospel.
Right.
Whether it's from me or one of our leaders, like they're hearing Jesus.
Sure.
It's like, and this may be the only church opportunity they get.
Sure.
So we need to make every Sunday, every Wednesday fun, but also gospel driven.
Right.
And so because of that, sometimes Sundays and Wednesdays are hard.
Yeah.
Sometimes volunteers come up to me and said, I don't know how great it was, but no one got hurt. And I'm like, we'll take it. Hey, I was in that class for a few minutes. Great job, and we're hoping that those seeds just get sprinkled in. And then there's other times where, man, they're involved and they're engaged and they love it.
Yeah.
And so working with that, seeing adults interact, we have a couple of adults that just serve all the time. And like, I see the joy they get from serving in kids ministry, and it's awesome. And sometimes it's challenging. Sometimes I'm like, oof, I've been doing so much planning and it's early and I've had to do 30 other things that have nothing to do with children's ministry, that joy isn't there. And I see them come in, I'm like, oh, I got to get that joy.
Yeah.
We'll put on a little Forrest Frank, get me pumped up, let's go. But I love it. I wouldn't trade it for anything.
Yeah. No, that's great. So as you look back over your journey and your journey with God, your journey of faith, your journey through ministry, is there a specific scripture or life verse that has kind of anchored you in this journey?
Yeah. So the one I always go to is John 10:10. The thief comes to steal, kill, and destroy, but I have come to give you life and give it abundantly, which is Jesus talking.
Yeah.
Not because I expect abundant life to mean I'm always going to have everything I desire,
right,
but meaning like that I'm going to be filled with joy no matter the circumstance.
Sure.
Instead of chasing happiness, I'm chasing joy and finding that joy in God. And so that verse particularly just always reminds me that anytime the world or Satan, whatever terminology you want to use, offers you something that's not of God, it is to still kill and destroy. And anything, again, offered from God, even if the world, you look at it from a world's perspective and say, that's not the right decision.
Yeah.
From the world's perspective, it will always bring you an abundant life because it's in God's will. And so that verse allows, it's a connection to how I came to God, but then also is a good reminder, especially in those times of spiritual warfare or times of temptation when you really desire to do, and it doesn't work every time. I'm like everyone else. I fall to my temptations sometimes, but it's just a great verse to do it. And then it comes off the heels of, or it's in the middle of the great shepherd story. And so it's just that's kind of been my life verse.
Yeah.
With that.
No, that's great. Last question. What is one thing that you wish every person in our church really knew or believed about God?
I think ultimately,
it's that God wants them to serve in kids ministry.
It's that God wants them to serve in kids ministry every week, every week. No, I think God does want them to serve in church. I think that's pretty clear. But stepping down from the soapbox now, obviously we want everyone to know God loves them.
Yeah.
And hopefully that's a message you get without listening to a podcast. Just by coming to church on Sunday and Wednesday, you get that. I think what I've been looking at and studying just through different things that man, I want y'all to know how much God loves you, but in light of how big God is, like the insignificance of that we should be in comparison to the God we serve, but the significance he places on us is so incredible. And when we, this is probably covered in previous theological things, but like when you realize God is that big and can do, and you really wrap your mind around it, nothing the world throws at you can shake your faith.
Right.
And so I don't know what the future holds. I don't know what exists outside of the planet Earth, right?
Right.
I don't know any of that. But if I believe, number one, that God is big enough to do whatever he wants,
Mm-hmm.
and he's in control. And then I believe, number two, that God is powerful enough to connect every little thing to him, then nothing that comes out of anything will ever shake my faith.
Right.
Because I may not even be able to point it exactly to an exact verse in scripture, but I can point it to a powerful God.
Sure.
And so that mindset probably over the last years has changed the way I view God. And I mean, it really opens up your relationship when you start realizing that, because it makes you appreciate his love for us more.
Yeah.
It makes your prayer. I mean, like if you believe in a God that can create planets, but still loves you, that should blow up your prayer life to an insane level. And I have experiences with some dear friends where they were going through something. I couldn't sleep, and I couldn't sleep, and I was like, I just want to pray for them. Mm-hmm. And I didn't really even pray anything specific. I literally prayed a significant name to the situation. Just repeat the name over and over. Repeat the person's name, and I repeated in Jesus' name. Mm-hmm. I had no direction, no anything. And literally the next day, there was positive movement in that situation. And I'm telling a story not because I have some really great prayer life, because I struggle to communicate with God as much as I think the next person. But I truly think, like, because I believe God was big, but because I also believe, like, I don't know what your plan is, but I know you have a plan.
Right.
It did allow that moment of just like, you know what? Let me humble myself. I'm just going to say the name and your name.
Yeah.
Because those are two most important things in that situation.
Yeah, that's good.
Well, Ryan, thank you so much for your time. Thank you for joining us today at the table. It's always a gift to hear the heart behind our ministries. And today's conversation reminded us of how vital it is to invest in the next generation. If you're a parent or volunteer or someone who simply cares about the future of the church, then I hope that this conversation has encouraged you. And if you felt a nudge during this episode, maybe a pull to be a part of what God's doing in our kids ministry, we'd love to help you take that next step. There's always room here at Fellowship West to serve. Whether you love teaching, playing games, holding babies, or just showing up with a big smile, you can make an eternal difference in the life of a child. So fill out a sign up to serve form on the Church Center app, or reach out to Pastor Ryan to learn more. And don't forget, next week, we'll continue our West Family interview series with another great conversation that you won't want to miss.
Thank you for joining us today at The Table. We hope this conversation has been meaningful to you and that you feel encouraged in your journey of faith. If you'd like to stay connected, be sure to subscribe to the podcast so you never miss an episode. And be sure to join us in person. For more information about Sunday service times and locations, head to our website, fellowshipwest.com. If something from today's conversation resonated with you, share it with a friend or leave us a review, because everyone has a seat at the table. Until next time, remember, you are loved and there's always a place for you here. Take care, and we'll see you again soon.